Thank you again. I'll add my thank yous as well to everybody for coming today. It's an honor to host you. Your time is very valuable, and we appreciate you taking it or spending some of it with us. They say about U.S. presidents that a lot of times they don't need any introduction. I don't think this gentleman needs an introduction either. I think everybody in this room knows and respects the same way that I do Senator John McCain, a man of honor, patriotism, and a man who understands service to country. He looks at the role of government and looks at how he betters the service it provides to its people, but also a practical approach to how government can serve as the common ground for groups to come together, public-private partnerships. Whether it be to urge business executives to invest in Northern Africa or after the Arab Spring, or being forthright with the American people when they are not hearing it straight from their government, I think overall you will find and learn some great things from Senator John McCain, a man who crosses party lines for the betterment of his country, and this is important to me, a man who I believe in an environment that has rarely been so divisive in Washington continues to push aside politics of the second and instead focuses on the long-term benefits of good policy and a good understanding of politics. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to introduce Senator John McCain. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for not mentioning that I lost a race for President of the United States. I thank you very much. I always appreciate that. And by the way, after I lost, I slept like a baby. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. And I'd also like to begin by asking your sympathy for the families of my home state of Arizona, because Barry Goldwater from Arizona ran for President of the United States. A man named Morris Udall from Arizona ran for President of the United States. And Bruce Babbitt from Arizona ran for President of the United States. I from Arizona ran for President of the United States. Arizona may be the only state in America where mothers don't tell their children that someday they can grow up and be President of the United States, so I ask your sympathy. I'd like to mention a couple of recent items with you, and then a few remarks about the long view that we need to take, and then I'd like to, as quickly as possible, get to the most important part, and that is respond to your questions or comments or insults. And it's nice to see old friends and some old enemies here today. I thank you for being here. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your involvement. The future, in my view, of the world will rest not on governments, but also on private sector involvement, engagement, and sometimes risk-taking. So I'm very grateful that you are here, and I believe that this is something that really is going to be vital in the future. Let me just give you a quick illustration. Last Friday night, before Congress went out of session, remember that I believe it was Mark Twain that said, "No man's property is safe while the legislature is in session." We had a final vote around 12:30 at night on an amendment from the senator from Kentucky, Senator Rand Paul, to do what? Cut off all aid to Egypt, Libya, and Pakistan. It got 10 votes, and I'm happy to tell you that it only got 10 votes, but I can also tell you it took a lot of work to keep that vote margin down. It's hard to explain to Americans when we have high unemployment and our economy continues to stumble along, to convince them how important it is to provide aid and assistance to these countries. And I'd like to remind you a little historical perspective. After World War I, we didn't join the League of Nations, and there was that struggle that went on. In the 1930s, we had Lindbergh and Henry Ford and the America Firsters. After World War II, in the Republican Party, there was a struggle between the Taft and Eisenhower wing of our party, and that debate now continues today within not only the Republican Party, but also in parts of the Democrat Party, and it's an important debate and discussion, particularly in this changing world. I'd just like to mention to you that I had the great honor of knowing Chris Stevens. I went to Benghazi and spent time with him during the struggle when he was living in a hotel and his life was threatened on a daily basis. I was with him on last July the 7th when the Libyan people voted to reject Islamic parties and overwhelmingly voted in favor of reformist and democratic, in my view, democratic parties. He and I went down to the main square in Tripoli where thousands and thousands and thousands of Libyans were celebrating their first free and fair election. And as they saw us, as we stood there, they said, "Thank you, America. Thank you, thank you, thank you." So don't think that this dreadful assassination reflects the view of the Libyan people. In fact, it's the opposite. And I am convinced that what has happened hopefully will galvanize all of us in this struggle that is taking place between radical Islam and the other forces of moderation that's going on throughout the Middle East. What killed those 4 brave Americans was not a result of a spontaneous demonstration, nor was it a result of a video. It was a result of a planned terrorist attack, and now the administration is finally coming around to acknowledging that fact. But it also indicates that there are strong forces of al-Qaeda throughout the Middle East, especially in these countries that have not really formed effective and strong governments, which is an argument for our assistance. Let me just say, if we were having this gathering a little over 2 years ago, and it's an important gathering, Gaddafi was in power, Ben Ali was in power in Tunisia, Mubarak was in power in Egypt, and the Syrian people had not risen up in an attempt to remove Bashar al-Assad from power. So if that profound changes have took place in the last 2 years, it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the next 2 years. And so, in my view, it argues for the United States involvement and assistance, not dictating, but assistance of these countries so that they can make the transition. And we have to convince our constituents that this is an American's national security interest to do so. Charity, love of democracy, all of that are very nice things to say and talk about. But it's also important from the national security standpoint if these countries go in the wrong direction. And just a couple of words about Egypt, because Egypt is the heart and soul of the Arab world. 1 out of every 4 Arabs that live in that part of the world live in Egypt. And the events there, I think, will have a profound effect on the rest of the Arab world. And it's very, very tense and uncertain situation with this new government. But I think the last thing that the United States should do at this point is to cut off aid, as many are saying that we should do. Now, we have the right to expect and demand certain progress and things like that, but if anybody believes that a collapse of the Egyptian economy is in the United States' national interest, I'd like to have that discussion and debate. So what this is all about is an inevitable reduction in foreign assistance. That's going to happen. The Congress of the United States will not continue to fund assistance and aid at the level they have been. So it argues dramatically, not only because of the money issue, but for the real issue of how we can really assist these countries. I believe that the future of Egypt rests on their economy. If their economy is not restored, then I think that gives the extremist forces an incredible advantage. If it doesn't, then the opposite. So public-private partnerships and commercial involvement for both businesses, large and small, are vital, I think, to the future of the economy of the world. So what you're doing and what we're talking about is, I think, the future of the, actually of not only the Middle East, but of the world. We have to create, and those countries have to create an environment where investors will invest. There's no doubt about that. We can't have an obligation to our stockholders. But at the same time, I also hope that some companies, both large and small, would be willing to take a risk and to invest, and in that way help us on this very difficult path that lies ahead of us. Finally, I'd just like to say I travel around the world a lot, And I worry about the image that the United States of America has in the world. There's a perception, either rightly or wrongly, that we are withdrawing. And as Osama bin Laden once said, there's a strong horse and the weak horse, and people like the strong horse. And I believe that we have to play a much more robust leadership role. Rather than talking about withdrawing all the time from the Middle East, we ought to be talking about leading and success, and even the word victory. In Afghanistan the other day, in case you missed it, there was a very sophisticated attack on our most heavily defended base. They wiped out 6 irreplaceable Harrier aircraft. It cost about $30 million each. It was done by 15 people in U.S. Army uniforms. When people believe we are withdrawing, and if you tell them that loud enough and often enough, they begin to believe it. There's a famous anecdote about the Taliban prisoner and the American interrogator, and the Taliban prisoner says, "You got the watches, we've got the time." And there is no better description of what I think is the prevailing view in the Middle East today, and I think we need to turn that around. So finally, let me say that I'm grateful you're here. Everybody in this room had something else to do rather than being here today. It is typical of America that we, and our generosity and our care and concern about people all over the world. I've been to the refugee camp in Syria, where I met young women who had been gang raped and parents who'd seen their children tortured and killed, and defectors from the Syrian army who told us that that was the instructions and orders that they have. And I've been to a lot of places in the Middle East where they look to the United States of America for leadership. And I hope that with the kind of involvement that we can get the private sector and the public sector involved, we will help these people achieve the same aspirations and goals that are so vital to us. One thing I think we have learned is that these aspirations and dreams are not bound by ethnic or national boundaries or religion. I think it is universal, and I think the United States of America can still play a vital role, and your assistance will be vital too. With that, I'd like to respond to any questions or comments or insults that you might have. Thank you.
Leif Rosenberger, Chief Economist at U.S. Central Command in Florida. My question revolves around Afghanistan, sir. As you know, between now and the end of 2014, upwards of 150,000 foreign troops and 30,000 contractors will be leaving that country. And it seems to me we have to figure out a reason for the Afghan private sector to stay, or they're going to leave and go to Dubai. And looking around Afghanistan, I don't see a lot of aggregate demand to replace the war economy. So what I do see is a possibility of public-private partnerships, as mentioned earlier, and look around and see where there is a new customer base for what these people can make. And I see it in places like India and China that have a huge middle class. So my thoughts are, I think we need to start working on this problem now and not wait till 2015 and wake up in the morning and see everybody leaving the country. Your thoughts, sir?
First of all, my thoughts are I agree with you. Approximately 90% of the Afghan economy today is directly related to foreign and U.S. aid and assistance. And they are, if all things being equal, if we leave in 2014, there's no doubt that they would have a very severe recession, if not a depression. So I think that the conundrum here is that in order for people in this room to be willing to invest in Afghanistan and both projects large and small, is they have to have a secure environment. And I worry, as I'm sure potential investors do, as to whether there will be that kind of environment where they can see their projects come to fruition. Right now, I have to tell you that I do not see that secure environment. We keep announcing withdrawal dates. We keep announcing that we are leaving. And the people in the region, not just Afghanistan, but also Pakistan and the Haqqani Network and others, and the Taliban, take that into consideration and accommodate to it. Karzai, who I've known since 2001, when Bagram fell from the Taliban, and we were there that night, acts in a rather paranoid and mercurial fashion. But that's because Karzai's trying to figure out how he can stay in power and how he can adjust to the realities of the United States leaving. He saw what happened in Iraq. We promised and committed to a residual force in Iraq. Instead, we did not, and I'd be glad to go through the reasons why this administration basically sabotaged that idea. And so he sees what happened there. And by the way, Iraq is deteriorating. Al-Qaeda's coming back. Iranian flights with arms for Bashar Assad are overflying Iraq as we speak. We were there recently. Barzani, president of Kurdistan, has not spoken to Maliki in over a year. They've just sentenced their vice president, a Sunni, to death. This is the kind of government that we're seeing deteriorate there. So he sees that example, and so do others in the region. That's why I think it's so important that we had some success and give them an environment that they think is... Now, finally, and I'm over-answering your question, but we have agreed to a strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan. And Karzai and all of the others have embraced it. What that means is that we would keep some forces there at maybe 1 or 2 air bases and some capabilities for counterintelligence and others. But also, he saw that commitment with Iraq and it didn't come through. So these are very interesting times, and we have to have some stability in order to expect people like you to make the kind of investments that will prevent this economic I won't use the word catastrophe, but certainly a very serious crisis that would arise when we do depart.
Sir, good morning. I want to thank you for your service both as a naval aviator and a U.S. Senator here today.
Could I remind you, it doesn't require a great deal of aviation skills to get shot down.
Well, sir, as a naval aviator myself, I know that to be true. I'm here today with 3 midshipmen from the United States Naval Academy at the behest of Ambassador Dobriansky, and I'm curious for them who these midshipmen are going to shape and one day enforce policy for our great country. The recent decline of congressmen and women having military experience. On that note, sir, do you think that plays a role in how we govern this country and our foreign policy?
I think it's always important to have a certain number of individuals who have been in the military, particularly in these rather dangerous times. I absolutely agree with that. But I've also seen great leaders who have not had military experience. I look at Ronald Reagan. I think his military service was in the Hollywood lots, I believe in it, right? And so it's not a vital ingredient, but I think it's important that we have some. Now, there are some Iraq and Afghan war veterans, both Democrat and Republicans, who have been running for public office, and some of them have been succeeding as well. And I need not mention my class standing at the Naval Academy to the midshipmen here. Sir.
We have 1.9 million children whose parents are serving in the armed forces, particularly in Afghanistan, Iraq, and in war areas. And unfortunately, we don't have a system in place that helps these young parents as they enter service, or their wives or husbands that stay behind, on the special needs these kids will have, but more importantly, the parents, to give them the skills to be parents while they're deployed, and more importantly, to help them when they come back if they have PTSD or if they've had in any way some kind of trauma to them, both either a traumatic brain injury or a psychological trauma. And it seems like we owe these individuals more than what we're giving them. By the way, I'm Harold Koplowitz, and I'm the president of the Child Mind Institute.
Well, my response is that we can never do enough for the men and women who are serving in the military and those who have served. That's first and foremost obligation. And I'm overjoyed to tell you it's very different, the reception that these young men and women get as opposed to those of us who returned from another war. And in fact, it's to our eternal shame. And it was the reason why a lot of my fellows never were able to come home. Look, we do a lot. I don't think you understand. We do a great deal. There is an enormous amount that we do. We can always do more. There are programs for hiring veterans. In fact, we have 6 of them. There are programs now for treatment of PTSD. There is an abundance. I'd be glad to send you a long, long list. There is an involvement by the public sector, by the private sector, that is incredibly important. We don't do enough. But to say that we really don't care for these people is, frankly,
No, I think it's their children.
Defiance of the facts that I know of. And we take care of their families, too. I'll take you out to Luke Air Force Base. I'll take you down to Fort Huachuca. I'll take you to Fort Bragg. And you will see that there are enormous support apparatus there for the families. Do we do enough? No, but we do plenty. And we need to do more. But to somehow think that the families and others are not taken care of by their friends and neighbors, frankly, is in defiance of the facts as I know them. And I have never seen anything like the service. I ran into a sergeant the other day that had 6 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's amazing. And by the way, there's one other huge problem that we don't understand, and that's suicides. And many of these suicides, about 30% of them, are people who have never deployed. So it's not just from experience in combat that is causing these suicides. We need to do a lot more, but believe me, we do a lot, and I'll be glad to introduce you to many, many families, including my own. I have a son who's a naval aviator that will tell you that there is enormous support apparatus out there, but if you've got any ideas of what we can do more, I guarantee you I'll run them through the Congress of the United States. If there's one thing that's bipartisan in the Congress of the United States, it's support for the men and women who are serving in the military.
Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, the GI Bill that allows service members to give the educational benefits to their children is a very, very important piece of legislation that we passed. And by the way, I have a son who was a Marine who's at Texas A&M University. One reason I encouraged him is that Texas A&M gives a free ride to all Iraq and Afghan war veterans, and was very grateful he decided to choose A&M. Go ahead.
Connie Duckworth, founder Arzu Rugs, Afghanistan. And Senator McCain, there are a number of us around this area who've been 10-year veterans of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, which was originally set up as a public-private partner to help develop the economy of Afghanistan. And my question is this.
By the way, did you share my views on the difficulties there?
No, that's really what I'd love you to comment on, because I think our frustration as individual citizens of the United States who have committed private funds, not only personally, but from our friends and colleagues and anyone we can get to listen, are feeling somewhat disappointed with the disconnect on the public funding side relative to support initiatives that are already ongoing and working effectively that don't seem to merit attention by the powers that be that are responsible for aid development in Afghanistan.
Is that because of our embassy or our programs from Washington? What is?
It's really I think the function of USAID in its role in creating the economy in Afghanistan.
Well, thank you, and I would be more than happy to hear some examples of those concerns, because I agree with you that most people would agree that we have not gotten a return for the AID dollars that have been invested. Now, a lot of it, as people say, is because of the lack of a secure environment, et cetera, but I'd be more than happy to hear from from you is exactly some of those examples and what the fixes are. I thank you.
Good morning, Senator McCain. My name is Hajime Matsura. I'm a journalist from Japan writing for the Sankei Shimbun. I'd like to ask you a question about the future of public and private investment in China and how the power transition will affect
our relations with China. I didn't even mention that because I wanted to take as much time as I could to question and answer, but there's no doubt that and it was an unfortunate word, pivot, but the pivot to the Asia-Pacific region on the part of our strategic policies is, I wouldn't use the word pivot, but the fact is that we see a rising China. And it's not a matter of, quote, containment, and it's not a matter of confrontation with China, but it is a matter of American presence and American alliances that are very important as we see China emerging as a world power. I'm sure you noticed in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, the Chinese just launched an aircraft carrier. And everybody talks about, well, it'll take them years before they can really use it and all that. Yeah, that's right. But the fact is that there is no greater statement of a nation's desire to project power than an aircraft carrier. And so there's no doubt as to that they are fulfilling Deng Xiaoping's fourth or fifth priority that he laid out a long time ago for China. And the tensions in the region are real, and the whole issue of the South China Sea is one that is can lead to increased tensions. I do not predict ever a major confrontation with China. I do predict that if the United States builds its alliances, strengthens our partnerships, and arrangements like, for example, we now have an agreement with Australia that American Army and particularly Marines come in, train with the Australians, and leave. We will not build bases in the Pacific region a la that you used to see in Germany and other places where you have the school and the hospital and all of that. But you will see agreements with all of these countries, Indonesia, even the Philippines will be coming back there, and other countries that are concerned. In fact, by the way, our new best friends are the Vietnamese. Not long ago, a ship that's named after my father and grandfather paid a port visit to the port of Da Nang, which shows that if you live long enough, anything is possible in this world. But so I think we are going to have to strengthen our security arrangements with all of these other countries. There's no doubt in my mind that China has been a disappointment to us in a number of areas, including this lack of any kind of modernization of their political system. And we obviously are seeing bizarre things happening, like the British guy that was killed and the son of a high-ranking member of the Politburo in an accident in a Ferrari, and this kind of, you wrote a novel, nobody would read it. So there are increased tensions in the region. We have to maintain those relationships. And again, it's not a matter of confrontation with China, but it is a matter of having strong and cohesive alliances in the region to prevent these tensions from escalating out of control. And remember, in the guns of August of 1914, nobody ever believed that we would get into a conflict, and I'm not saying that we will, but we need to take every measure to prevent such a happening. And finally, we have to remember that the world's economy has shifted from Europe and America to the Asia-Pacific region, which makes it even more vital national security interest. I'm doing better than your football team.
Ouch, ouch. Actually, sir, it's your football team too. But I would just like to get back to what we were talking about earlier, and I wanted to ask, we recently just experienced the Arab Spring, and so in countries like Libya, Egypt, and then some others, they are rebuilding. And so to what point do you feel that it is that it should be a government role as far as helping them to grow, and then a private corporation, role to help them to grow and to come about and to become, successful nations and contributing nations.
Well, let me just say a couple of words. It was a little over 2 years ago that a young man in Tunisia who was a college graduate was selling fruits and vegetables. The police came, they took some of his products. He objected, they beat him up and humiliated him in front of his fellow citizens. He put gasoline on himself, lit himself on fire, and he lit a fire that's still spreading and I believe is not confined to the Middle East. I am convinced that once that young man did that we can't go back to the old days. I hear some of my friends on right and left say, well, we should have stuck with Mubarak. We should have stuck with Ben Ali. My friends, they were dictators who were oppressive and repressive, and they were going to go sooner or later. The forces of history were against them. Ever since the invention of these devices, then the word's going to spread, and dictators are not going to be able to stop it. I'll never forget being in Egypt and talked to a young man. He said, pulled out his BlackBerry and said, I can get 200,000 people in the square in 3 hours. I remember in Tunisia meeting with the young people, your age, who made this revolution. And a young woman stood up and said, Senator McCain, you know who our national hero is? And I said, who? And she said, Mark Zuckerberg. And when you think about that, it's understandable. So, look, the forces and winds of change are blowing around the world, and it's up to the United States not to try to stop that tidal wave that's taken place, but to make sure and direct it so that their hopes and dreams and aspirations are realized. In some of these countries, they're already being stymied. And the best way to do it is what we are here all about, is economic development. I promise you that the future of Egypt doesn't lie on who's elected so much as to whether their economy recovers. Their tourism is in the tank, their economy is broken, and there has got to be economic development to provide jobs and opportunities for these young people, or they're going to be back in Tahrir Square. So that's why it's so important that you are here. Look, we are seeing, as I said, a tectonic change. And this tectonic change can be make a world that's so much better than the one that it was a little over 2 years ago, or we will be riven by sectarian, religious extremism, Al-Qaeda's return. We can see calamitous consequences. And I believe that the people in this room can play a very key and vital role in seeing that the hopes and dreams and aspirations that are shared by all of us, as our founding fathers asserted a long, long time ago, can be realized. I'm proud to travel around the world and represent the United States of America. And there is a lot of resentment, and there's this religious extremism. But I guarantee you, these young people that made these revolutions look to us. They look to us. And I think that we can play a historic and important role in the future of the world. And I see a big 00. I see a hook over there in the corner. But could I say thank you very much? And again, it's really nice to be with you. Thank you so much.